My name is Brant Hanley, Managing Director of Resource Options International. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have Bob Nugent. Bob's somebody I've known for, gosh, I guess it's been over 30 years. It's hard to say that without getting a smile on my face, but Bob and I met when we were expatriates back in our 20s in Switzerland, and Bob was in the hospitality industry, working a number of different opportunities there before he went into his entrepreneurial stage. I was with Procter & Gamble in my first days with that marketing organization, and we made a friendship. Actually, I think first met through business, if I'm not mistaken. We won't go into the details there, but that's a story for another time. And Bob and I have stayed in touch both personally and professionally over the years. It's been wonderful to be a partner with Bob over the last 10 plus years since he's been with MAP Consulting. MAP and Bob have referred a number of middle market clients, and I learned about the middle market through Bob Nugent. Bob has had a specialty in helping them with their business plan execution over the years. Has done a wonderful job in building their enterprises all over the country, and has been very gracious and graceful in recommending us in, and we've been helping to build each other's business while helping our clients build out their enterprise. And so Bob's here with us today to talk about job benchmarking. We're very excited about what he has to say. One of the things that certainly came through in many of the comments and the surveys that folks came back with was the importance of retention, and how job benchmarking has really proven to increase retention rates over the 90% level. Bob will be talking a little bit about that during his presentation, but getting the scope right, understanding exactly how a job should be scoped and is designed for the right person has a huge impact on the ability to retain, not only find, but retain the right people. So Bob's got a very interesting presentation, and we'll get started in a couple of minutes as more people come on board, but about ready to turn it over to Bob in a minute. In fact, why don't we just go ahead and do so? It looks like we're just about the 5-minute level, and we've got some more people coming in. So Bob, I will go on mute and turn it over to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Brant. Yeah, it has been over 30 years since we've known each other. and actually, I've been working with Brant extensively in the 15 years that I've been working with MAP, Management Action Programs. I will talk to you about that and really a practice that benchmarking that we started a couple of years ago. Prior to using benchmarking, I was using top grading. And if anybody remembers, top grading was developed by Dr. Brad Smart in conjunction with an extensive Fortune 500 company study, where he developed a hiring process really and tested it out with Jack Welch at GE. And Jack Welch's desire was that from the point the process began in GE, that he would only hire A players to come into the organization. Anybody that was a B player would become an A player over a certain period of time, and that within 24 months he wanted to have all A players in management. So that's how I came across top grading and used it with my clients until I discovered benchmarking, and I'll show you the reasons why I picked up benchmarking. So job benchmarking is hiring, developing, and retaining A players using predictive analytics. And I can say that if you hire and develop A players, you'll probably end up retaining them. And the predictive analytics is really building what I call the job assessment. So we are actually building a tool that will identify A players in a certain job category. We're building competencies for the mighty middle market, and welcome to the webinar. Yes, I do call myself the master of business plan execution, and WebEx was one of my success stories many years ago. I came to them about 4 years prior to them getting purchased by Cisco for $3.2 billion, and I developed the 4-year plan to take them to that place. The philosophy behind MAP, Management Action Programs, as the company is called, and I call it the map to a proven business success system is the Pareto principle. And Pareto had a boiled down statement that he came up with after a study funded by the Italian government to go find out why some businesses work better than others. So he came back with this statement which says, focus on the vital few and ignore the trivial many. We can't always ignore the trivial many depending on where we are on the leadership ladder. So we can delegate or delay. The MAP management system is a proven success system. We've been in business for 56 years. And you'll see under the vision, mission, and values, we say that the key critical functions in a business to be successful are these 6 functions: communicating, planning, organizing, staffing, controlling, and leading. If you are excellent in your organization at executing on these key critical functions, you will be successful. And so today we're going to take a deep dive on staffing. What's our value proposition? MAP helps organizations achieve predictable and profitable growth. Our vital factors process creates a culture of growth and success through accountability and develops high-performing leaders. Today on staffing, the staffing challenge, as you all probably know that are out there, that it's difficult to find A players. There's a lot of companies are hiring. A players only represent, it's said, about 10% of the total candidate population. So it's really a challenge to go out there and find good people to come into organizations. So, but we want to produce more with fewer employees for customers who demand more for less. That's the business environment. And all jobs require the right talent for maximum performance. And if you are following The Voice, you can see that progressively over the weeks, this is probably one of the most talented seasons that Voice has had. And it's going to be extremely difficult to get up to that top winning role in this talent show. But that's the same as our organizations. We need to find that talent. So in job benchmarking, we concentrate on the job. We don't concentrate on people who we might think in the organization might be able to fill a role. We really want to focus on the job and ask ourselves the question, why does this job exist? The 3 major biases that interfere with job matching are experience, education, intelligence. 2 of these you can say we find on a resume, experience and education, not necessarily the intelligence. But I think that you all would agree that a resume is probably the best nonfiction that people write about themselves. So how do we get past that? We hire for skills and we fire for attitude. And there's a good reason behind that as well. And the reason that we should know before having a candidate come into our organizations. Brad Smart, along with developing top grading, did a whole spreadsheet on the true cost of hiring, and he came up with his study that said that a mishire will cost you sometimes 7 to 15 times base compensation. So it's a costly mistake that we make in organizations. So the tool that I use to build this job assessment is called Trimetric DNA. And it comes from a company called TTI, which is Target Training International. And I am what they call a value-added associate for that organization. The reason why I've selected them to do businesses, you can see that in the assessment world, they are very complete. And especially when we're talking about adverse impact studies, which are really important for us not to get sued by the EEOC, that is a study that makes sure that this process does not prejudice any candidate coming into an organization. And the other is the validation. The TTI has the most third-party validation process for testing the science to make sure that it is very accurate. And then the international norming, and they're almost standalone there, is that depending on what country you come from or where you're doing business as an organization, there are differences in international assessments. So TTI takes that into consideration and has been doing it for a long, long time. What are the keys to job matching? Key accountabilities. This is the most important step. Listen to the job talk. Why does the job exist? Eliminate the bias, and then formulate an ideal candidate form for someone coming into the organization so you're ready to start that development process as soon as they step through the door. We start by identifying what we call the stakeholders or subject matter experts. And the subject matter experts are usually 3 to 7 people, people who have done the job excellently in the past, people that are managing that job, people that are currently maybe in that job and are identified as excellent, and people that interface cross-departmentally with that job on a regular basis. And that is your stakeholders. So the stakeholders are brought together, and what they do is they do a brainstorming session. And the brainstorming session is to come up for at least 25 reasons why the job exists. So if we had a customer service role, these would be some of the statements that that team would put down for that brainstorming session for why that job exists. This is kind of the result of that brainstorming session. So you can see that you have on the left-hand side the reasons why the job exists. They are put into categories because when you go through the 25 statements and then you start matching them up, you'll quickly realize that they fall into certain categories. So these are already put in those categories. If you look at the center, you see the key accountabilities. And the key accountabilities are taking these reasons why the job exists and then making the key accountability statement, combining those statements and coming up with one statement, which becomes the key accountability. Once we have the key accountabilities, we are ranking them by priority. And the question to ask yourselves after going through the session is, if this person didn't perform this key accountability, would this person still have a job in 12 months? So that's the emphasis of how important those key accountabilities are to the job. Then we rank them by priority, as you see here, and then the weighting is very interesting. If we say that a person is in their key accountabilities 80% of the time, because 20% of their time they're doing administrative work or helping on a project that's not really related to their role, then how much time does that person spend in each of those key accountabilities? It's not always by priority. It's really by what the role that they perform on a day-to-day basis. So as you can see, we've weighted of that 80% that the most important one, or the one that takes the most time, is communicate effectively and efficiently in a customer service role, and the other weightings there. So key accountabilities provide background for determining skills, knowledge, behaviors, motivators, certifications, experience, and intelligence. Again, you might find certifications, experience in the resume, but you'll generally won't find skills, knowledge, behaviors, and motivators. So that's one thing that the key accountability and building of that talent model does. It also identifies motivators, and this is why this is important. How people behave is the how. Okay, how someone behaves, what their personality is like, their communication style is the how. The why is related to their motivators, and it's very important to know, because their why or motivators will determine how they will behave. So you can see some of the motivators: utilitarian, theoretical, individualistic, aesthetic, social, and traditional. And I won't go into detail on each and every one of these, but theoretical is someone who likes acquiring knowledge. And their role, and utilitarian is the value of the practical, so they want to be paid for what they do. They value that. Social is someone who really generally has concern for others. Job-related behaviors. These are some of the behaviors that people will be in their roles. And then job-related competencies and skills. There are very few assessments that actually measure skills, but trimetric DNA does that. So when we build the assessment, this is kind of what the assessment will look like after a talent or a candidate comes through that model assessment. So here are 2: customer focus and self-management. We can see that where the white circle is what the team has said that that person should be scoring in those certain areas. The dark circle in the middle here is the actual candidate, where they score. And then the blue area with the red line underneath that's the mean. That's the average of everyone who's taken this assessment is in that area. So as you can see, this person is fairly far away from what the job team would like this person to score in this area. But this is also cautionary. that I tell the teams when they do this is that people are not robots and they're not perfect. So would a 9 or a 9.5 be okay? Because you'll probably get more candidates if you take into consideration, or I say humanize, the job assessment. This is very interesting. This is called the gap analysis, and this is where I go to find problems, because it tells me a lot. It tells me here are the team that built the job. This is what they say that the top job competencies must be, or skills. Okay, 1 through 7. This is what they say should be the primary motivators or driving force clusters. These are the motivators for this job. And the job-related hierarchy, these are the top 4 things as far as behavior is concerned in that role. So what this tells me is very interesting, because if we were just to look at the competencies, we'd say, hey, this candidate's pretty good. Other than teamwork, there's their exact match or a good match, good compatibility in each one of these skills. However, when we go down to the motivators, there's a glaring problem right here. And that if you look at structured, which is the red, which is a poor compatibility, and then you go down to, and that is the why, okay? So if they don't like to be structured, if that's not a motivator for them, then look at the behaviors that are required for this role, which are very structured behaviors: following policy, organized workplace, analysis of data, follow up and follow through. This candidate, in my opinion, would not be a good candidate for this role. So ideal candidate form, what we're looking for is the position description, which is written with the emphasis on the key accountabilities. The working environment, is this going to be satisfactory for this candidate? Education, experience, certifications, which come from resumes, and then all the pre-employment assessments that we do, other than the trimetric DNA, which I think is a fairly complete assessment anyways. Also, the assessment provides you with pre-qualifier questions. So on the assessment, there will be interview questions for you to follow, as well as the coaching model of this assessment will provide you with training and skills that they might be weak in, that are required by the job. And TTI has a whole series of online learnings that candidates can use. Competencies, motivation, behaviors, as I just covered, and then hiring managers deal breakers. This might be you have to work on weekends, or there might be relocation required. So all these things need to be in that ideal candidate form to have a good process. So what are the benefits from job matching? Ability to compare behaviors, motivations, skills, obviously. Requirements against thousands of other similar benchmark jobs. They are all EEOC and OFCCP compliant. If the hiring process takes the normal costs of a telephone pre-screening, the interviews, the background checks, and things like that, that the trimetric DNA assessment, job assessment, will be compliant to all those things. And the main reason why I use job benchmarking is that for the past 4 years, as I said before, I've only been using it 2 years because they didn't have a track record prior, but now they do have a 4-year track record, which is 92% retention 4 years in a row. And what that means is that the people that were hired through this process are still in their jobs 4 years later and viewed by their managers and their organizations as a good or an excellent hire. Don't forget that your people are your competitive advantage. Okay, just like the Super Bowl or the World Cup, you need the right players on the field to win. Companies and organizations, the competition is heating up. It is now really a worldwide competition, and we have to have A players in our organizations to be competitive. These individuals are the most likely to create value for you and your vital stakeholders. This is what I do as a consultant when I go into organizations. Is I set up a performance grid and have the executives in that organization tell me where their current employees are. And as you can see, we have the A, B, and C. The performance grid is a 0 to 10 performance and a 0 to 10 behavior. We might have people that have great behaviors, but they don't get much done. So they are great in behavior. We call them hanger-oners. Sometimes I call them hiding in the weeds. And then we have people that are great in performance, but not necessarily good for the organization ethically. These I call onboard terrorists. So once we have this performance grid, we need to really focus on the Bs to make sure that we're moving them in the right direction in our development programs to become As, and to evaluate Cs whether they have a chance. And then for the best for the organization and for the person or individual is that if they're Cs and going to stay Cs, maybe they have a better chance of being in another role or another organization. And then this is the continuing succession continuum, which is we have the alignment, which is accountability, benchmarking, job descriptions, recruiting, hiring, onboarding, training, development, talent pools, talent pathways, and performance appraisals. And you can see the 6 key critical functions of a successful business are all in the middle here. We have to be great at these 6 things to have 6 functions to have a great organization, and we must develop our people and keep our people and retain our people by challenging them to be competitive and raising that bar continually. 90-day onboarding and learning plan. This also is a part of the trimetric DNA assessment and training development plan. As I said before, the coaching model will give you training and development exercises that to be performed on an ongoing basis. And as Peter Drucker, the guru of business consulting, said, the ability to make good decisions regarding people represents one of the last reliable sources of competitive advantage, since very few organizations are very good at it.
All right. Great, Bob. Great, Bob. Thank you so much. I know we've got a number of questions that have come in. So I'm going to kind of pull these off, both the surveys as well as few questions that have come into the room. So if you want to unmute yourself and get on your camera as well, let's have a little interaction on it. One of the main questions seems to be really around this plus 90% retention rate. We've got, oh gosh, 3 or 4 people that have asked questions somewhat, probably astoundingly in terms of really understanding that number, what's behind it, and what more you can tell us about, how they get to that number, and what are some of the steps so they too can have that type of a rate.
Okay. So I'm what you call a VAA, or Value Added Associate, for Target Training International. And as a VAA, it's in our own interest to track the success of this process to in the organizations that we bring this process into, and I've been doing this with Brant lately as well, and all the people that we go out and do searches for. And what we do is we track and see if these people are still around. And I would say, Brant and I have been working together for about 15 years, and I think most of the people that we've brought into the organizations that he's brought in are still there. Is that true?
Whoops, sorry.
I can't hear you, Brent.
Yeah, sorry. By and large, absolutely. We've had a very good success rate. But again, we haven't done as much job benchmarking, and that's something we're certainly going to be fitting in, as we move forward. Do we have any, hard statistics from TTI as it relates to, kind of where they've gotten this data, how many different job benchmarkings have been done? Is there any details around that, Bob?
Yeah, I actually checked in with our Target Training International yesterday, and they said that they've done well over 10,000 job benchmarking assessments in the past 4 years, and that number is really following up with people like me to find out if those people are still in their roles 4 years later since this process started, and the answer to that is that's where they got the 92%.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, what an incredible message in terms of, the proper planning, of course, around, setting up job specs. We know from our own recruiting business, the deeper we go in the organization, the more people we talk to as it relates to the folks that have the input on, the specific assignment, and the more information we gather, the better position spec we write. But that job benchmarking is an incredible tool. I think most of our clients would die for a plus 90% rate. We've got a couple more questions here, and we've got a couple more coming into the room, so I'll share those as they come together. Bob, the next question that we have is someone has asked, Kathy actually comes out of the pharmaceutical industry and has done a lot of work with regards to behavioral health types of positions, and wanted to have some information about whether or not we've got any experience in that field because of the certification that's required around kind of the behavioral health or licensed behavioral health positions. Any information on that?
So I have not. I had a client called Psychiatric Solutions Inc. that were bought by a major company, and they had about 240 psychiatric hospitals who I worked with for over 5 years. I used the assessment process of TTI, but benchmarking didn't exist then, so I'm not sure what the ramifications of using benchmarking in behavioral health organizations would be. I assume that it would be valid, but I'm not going to tell you that because I don't have that information.
Right, got it. Well, we could probably get some more information about that. Another question that's come in is with regards to the benchmarking process, when that is going on, how many people typically have to be interviewed, and how long does that take?
Are you talking about candidates or the stakeholder team?
Overall, so maybe you can talk about both of those, but okay. The question was more general as it relates to the amount of people that are involved as well as the time it takes to do so.
The stakeholder team who formulates this model assessment or job assessment would be 3 to 7 people. I always find that if you have too many, it's overkill, but if you get 5 to 7 people, I would say that would be an excellent sized team to get enough input for a valuable job benchmarking session. It takes a half day the first time around. Usually what I do is I go in to organizations and I do a train the trainer session. So I teach somebody from recruiting or from HR how to facilitate this process so that they can do it on their own from that point on. And that takes a half day the first time around, and I find that once they've done it once, it will probably take them an hour and a half to 2 hours to formulate, the second, third, fourth job benchmarks.
Got it. Great. Another question that's come in, Kathy, who works for nonprofits, has asked, is there any differential as it relates to doing this in the for-profit world versus the nonprofit world?
No, I think that the motivators are the most important thing to determine, this gives the motivators. So I would say in the nonprofit world, one of the higher, depending on the role, one of the higher motivators would probably be social, and this would identify people that did have that motivator and that would be motivated to do a nonprofit job. But I always say is that there isn't really much difference in a nonprofit from a profit organization, because the difference is only the reason for doing it. In nonprofit jobs, it's really to serve more and more people. So it's just like more and more revenue. If you want to serve more and more people, you have to grow the organization and have to go out and find more funding. So I think the roles are fairly similar in nonprofit and profit. I think it's mostly determined by the motivators.
Got it. And another question from John here is with regards to levels in the organization. His comment or question really was, it looks like this is something that would work at high levels, particularly where there's a lot of stakeholder interest as it relates to a C-suite position. But does this work at the manager level? Does this work at the district level? Can you talk to that?
Yes, as I said before, I've been using this for 2 years, but I have a couple of fairly large clients that are using this, and we started at the executive level and really benchmarking those roles first. But progressively over the last 2 years, over the last 2 years, we've been using it for manager roles and lower and individual contributor roles as well. So it's a progressive thing. I think the more that you use it, the better off you are as far as your selection process is concerned.
Got it. And there was a follow-up question as it relates to those different levels. Is there any difference, or do we know anything about the difference in retention rates?
Again, this is based on all the past 4 years, the tens of thousands of benchmarking assessments that have been done. So I really don't have the information as far as the level that it's been used at in this 10,000, but I would think, like myself, I advise the companies to use it progressively for all levels of the organization. So I would think that that would follow as far as the 10,000 that have been done as well.
Good. And another question that's come in here with regards to actually managing this process. Do they need to have a facilitator, or is this the type of thing where there can be a train-the-trainer type of a situation, so that you could come in as a consultant, say train the head of HR or someone in the org development department and teach them how to do this, or does this require ongoing outside facilitation?
I've seen it both ways. I had a large real estate company that wanted me to come in and do it every time, and that's fine. But most of the organizations I work with, I do a half-day train the trainer session, and then I actually set them up with an account so they can pull the assessments at will and without the assistance of MAP or myself. So that's probably the best and effective model, is that we set you up to handle those assessments on your own once you've been through a facilitated half-day session.
Got it. Good. To everyone who's in attendance, please put any questions that you have. We've got a couple more here, but for those of you live, you'd be able to put your question in the chat box, so by all means do so. We've got a few more minutes with Bob here. One next question, Bob, and this is related to kind of the follow-up. Once you kind of do that half-day session with the client, you develop the actual benchmarking status report. There was a reference in your presentation of kind of the follow-up, with regards to kind of tracking. How often is that done, and for how long a period of time?
Yeah, so don't forget, an important part of this is the development part of it as well, not just the hiring process. So the development process is them taking courses or getting training. Lots of times the client will include me in those trainings as far as a resource is concerned in the development process. And as I said, just like with Brent and myself, we go back all the time to the organizations where we have brought people into, and then again, for me, it's the past 2 years of my experience of organizations that I've used this with. So I check on a regular basis, or at least a couple of times a year with clients, whether they're working with me or not, how that person is doing.
Great. And then one last question here, and still invitations out to anyone else that wants to put them in, by all means, indicated here. But there's a question about company size. Obviously we're dealing with a lot with middle market companies, and we define that as the 10 million to $1 billion range, which is a pretty big range. But the question is, does this work on both startup companies as well as, say, larger, maybe small cap companies that maybe are above the $1 billion level? Any experience with that?
Well, I've worked with both. I've worked currently. I'm working with Oracle, where I'm using the tool as well. But I also have small, $2 to $3 million construction organizations that I work with as well. I recommend this tool for all of them. When you think about the expense of really of doing this, it's compared to the 7 to 15 times base compensation loss that that it prevents, then I would say that the return on investment of using this process is incredible.
Right. We've got an additional question. Winifred has come in and says, asks, how do you retain mid-level managers who are talented? In other words, already know that you've got A levels. Are there other tools that you work with, I think? And Winifred, by all means, clarify your question if I'm not asking it properly. But what other types of things can be done to retain A players?
A players like attention. I think there was a Gallup survey done about 4 or 5 years ago that said that the average A player wants to be recognized at least 7 times a month, which is a lot. Which is a lot of back patting. Some of us as managers don't have the behavioral capacity to do that. What I do with my clients is I build it into the process. So when we have our monthly meetings, I ask all the executive team to bring someone who's gone over and above the call of duty that works for them, and we will publicly acknowledge that person. The other component is really the development part. They want to know, they want to have a clear path of what their opportunities are within the organization, and they want to be trained. They love training. They're very competitive A players.
Good. And as a follow-up to that, just my own question with regards to retention, following up on what Winifred has asked, how important is compensation really? In your experience, getting the right pay package, of course, I know we need to be competitive, but, do companies need to overpay A players?
Well, I think, especially in this market, is that you are not going to find an A player on the street anywhere.
Right.
So, in this market, as Brent and I are painfully aware, is that if you're going to find an A player, you're going to have to go steal them. But on the other hand, this is a good question, because what the first volley should be in getting this A player across the finish line in your organization is really, is there anything else that is as important than salary? Because it might be flex time, it could be working from home, it could be there's many things that motivate people, that people want, and I don't think salary should be the starting point. It should be all those other questions first.
Right. Yeah, I would certainly say that's our experience too. I think they do have to be competitive, but in terms of really creating the employee value proposition, it should go well beyond it. It was interesting, that comment about back patting, as you referred to it, but I've heard this said many times. Being able to provide that verbal confirmation of a job well done goes so far with retaining good people. And, again, I think that's great to emphasize. We've got time for one last question. If anybody out there on the webinar has one, please write it in the box now. Bob, I want to thank you for your time. I did not mention at the beginning of the webinar that we do have an opportunity for you to have a conversation with Bob. He'd love to be able to tell you more about the opportunities in job benchmarking. And Bob, if you want to get the slide up with your contact details, you'll be able to share that in a minute. And if you can go ahead and load that up, Bob's offering a free session to anyone who can email or call him, and more than happy to answer any additional questions as it relates to this important part of the job hiring process. So Bob, can you put up that slide or turn it back over to you?
I can't find my slide.
Oh, there I am.
Yeah, let me see if I can find the slide.
All right, no worries. We can certainly send that out afterwards as well. But Bob is more than happy to offer some time with each and every one of you that has an interest to be able to come and contact him, and we'll get that information to you. If not during the webinar, we can send that out afterwards. So Bob, are you able to get your slide back up? I know it was at the end of your presentation.
Yeah, for some reason it won't let me pull it up.
All right. Well, we'll send that out to everyone. Once again, Bob, I want to thank you for your time and effort, and thank you all for attending. We're giving you a little extra time here to get back to your workday, but appreciate you joining us once again in this free webinar series on building competencies for the mighty middle market. Thanks again for attending. And thank you again, Bob, for your time.
Thank you.
All the best. Bye now.
Bye, everyone.